In the 16th and 17th centuries, drama critics in Italy and France expanded upon Aristotle's unity of action, which he outlines in his Poetics, by adding two more unities to form the so-called three unities of drama. These critics believed that achieving an illusion of reality or verisimilitude in the audience required the play's action to closely mimic the actual conditions of its staging. As a result, they imposed the unity of place, limiting the action to a single location, and the unity of time, restricting the time frame to the 2 or 3 hours it takes to perform the play, or at most a single day of either 12 or 24 hours. However, due in large part to the influence of Shakespeare, whose plays often feature numerous location changes and span many years, the unities of place and time never gained as much traction in English neoclassicism as they did in Italy and France. A significant critique came from Samuel Johnson in his Preface to Shakespeare from 1765, which further diminished the importance of these unities. Since then in England, the unities of place and time have been considered optional techniques employed by playwrights to achieve specific dramatic effects rather than mandatory rules. Let's begin our exploration of storytelling by discussing Aristotle's Poetics. While Poetics focuses on contemporary dramatic tragedies of its time, its relevance to you as a modern writer may vary based on your personal technique. Nonetheless, understanding the foundational principles is valuable. They exist for a reason. Knowing the rules, even if you choose to break them, is beneficial. After all, the basic lessons of storytelling are essentially exercises in pattern recognition. The purpose of the Poetics was to examine the storytelling elements that made tragedies so profoundly impactful and successful. It addresses various aspects such as theme, tone, and emotionally satisfying character arcs. One of the most crucial topics it covers is the concept of catharsis, an emotional purging where you release a breath you've been holding throughout a tense scene fraught with impending death or disaster. Cathartic moments are essential, and mastering the ability to create them is an invaluable skill for any writer. Aristotle also wrote about comedy, but unfortunately that text was lost in a great flood fire or some other calamity that often indiscriminately destroyed creative works. Consequently, we have to focus solely on his writings on tragedy. From the wealth of insights in Poetics today, we're going to examine the concept known as the three unities or dramatic unities. The three unities are unity of time, unity of place, and unity of action. Unity of time suggests that the action of the play should occur within a short internal chronology, ideally no more than 24 hours. From a modern perspective, this might seem immediately irrelevant. Today's media can span any amount of time, from a brief half-hour episode to stories covering entire generations. However, in Aristotle's day, this unity served a specific purpose. Stages were set in large amphitheaters with actors often playing multiple roles. Conveying the passage of time was tricky and potentially confusing, as masks and body language were used to differentiate characters across the vast space. Depicting various ages among those characters could complicate things further. Nowadays, with the help of well-known actors and descriptive prose, storytelling across long periods is straightforward, and non-linear narratives are not only possible but often preferred. Nevertheless, it serves a purpose for us as well. It's important to remember the tool of urgency, an element that can be crucial in any story, not just thrillers or adventures. Extending the timeline of your story can diminish that urgency. This isn't necessarily a drawback, but it's something to be mindful of. If you want to capture a reader's undivided attention, try to anchor it in the present moment. Unity of place suggests that the action should take place in a minimal number of locations, ideally just one. A public square or palace courtyard would usually serve this purpose well. This unity was more practical in Aristotle's time when stories faced logistical challenges. Changing locations required using set pieces or bringing out the chorus to describe the shift, which could be awkward and disrupt the audience's immersion. However, today we can capture a sweeping landscape with a few well-crafted lines, and visual media makes transitioning from place to place even easier. Nonetheless, many writers overlook the importance of a unity of place, and their work often suffers for it. Characters need clear goals and direction, maintaining a balance between progress and obstacles. Using a video game-style narrative, where a character must collect the 7 Dragon Balls or the 150 Pokémon, for instance, is suitable for an episodic adventure series. However, incorporating this approach in novels or films can dilute the narrative's impact, turning it into a montage of various places and experiences. Even worse, when we constantly shift characters from place to place, the focus shifts from them to the landscape. We end up noticing how the scenery changes at the expense of spending time with the people who inhabit it. While this approach works well in video games where gameplay often takes precedence over story and character development, and occasionally in TV shows, it is less effective in other forms of media. Unity of action suggests that the play's action should be as concise as possible. Accomplish the emotional beats and relevant plot points in a few efficient steps, avoiding subplots. Quality trumps quantity. If Aristotle had known about non-linear storytelling, he likely would have advised against it as well. Unity of action is essential to any story. What often makes Hollywood action movies feel shallow and unoriginal is an overabundance of action. But action doesn't only refer to gunfights and explosions. It encompasses the sequence of events through which your story unfolds, also known as plot points. The essence of good writing, both in terms of language and storytelling, is conciseness. Say what you need to say in as few words as possible. The better those words, the more elegant your writing becomes. If your story is weighed down by too many twists and turns, it will feel burdensome and suffer as a result. Understanding the 3 unities in drama is challenging without first reading Greek plays and recognizing their significance. Another challenge today is the fact that these unities are not strictly adhered to in modern drama, which makes it difficult for us to understand their importance in ancient Greek theatre. As mentioned earlier, when we examine plays from the last 400 years, beginning with Shakespeare's works in the 17th century up to contemporary plays, we observe that these unities are no longer considered essential to drama. For instance, Shakespeare's plays span various time periods and geographical locations. He sets his plays in a variety of fascinating locations. You'll find settings in Greece, Rome, and Egypt, like in A Midsummer Night's Dream, Antony and Cleopatra and Coriolanus. He also brings us to Italy with plays like Romeo and Juliet, The Merchant of Venice, and Measure for Measure. Many of his historical plays are set in England, such as the Henry series, Richard III and King Lear. Then there's Scotland, the setting for Macbeth. In Othello, the story starts in Venice and then moves to the island of Cyprus in the Mediterranean. Hamlet takes place in Elsinore, a royal castle in Denmark, with scenes unfolding in various parts of the castle and even on a plain in Denmark. Shakespeare masterfully introduces scene shifts as the action of the story demands, making each play a unique journey through different settings and times. Regarding the unity of action, most of Shakespeare's plays feature both a main plot and a subplot. However, the main action is never impeded by these subplots. His tragedies, like others, have a clear beginning, middle, and end. When it comes to the third unity, Shakespeare does not strictly adhere to the unity of time. Many of his plays span several years. In contrast, during Aristotle's time, when Greek theatre was flourishing, these three principles of unity were crucial for building and sustaining tension in the audience as the plays moved toward a catastrophic climax. Aristotle's principles of unity of time, place, and action were meant to intensify the play's impact through a single concentration of events occurring in a single setting and within a brief span of hours. Thus, in Greek tragedies, the unities were considered essential. They focused and captivated the audience's attention on the impending disaster and intensified the recognition or anagnorisis by the protagonist of their predicament, ultimately leading to the resolution of the plot. It's important to note that the plays came before the critical theory related to the three unities. Sophocles wasn't aware of the three unities and didn't strictly follow them when writing his plays. It was Aristotle who later deduced these principles after observing the staging of the plays. Aristotle developed his theory by analyzing Sophoclean tragedies. What Aristotle defined as the guiding principles of a play shouldn't be seen as prescriptive rules he dictated, but rather as rules he inferred from observing the plays and their impact on both himself and the audience. Aristotle's theory complements Sophocles' work, with Sophocles being the originator of what Aristotle later articulated in his Poetics. Aristotle suggests that the action of a play should ideally unfold within 24 hours. However, from the perspective of modern drama, unity of time doesn't hold the same significance as it did in ancient times. In contemporary theatre, narratives often span long periods, not only spanning many days but also generations. It is now common to reenact the past as it occurred and leap forward through time. In contrast, for ancient audiences, unity of time served a specific purpose. It created a sense of urgency, enhancing both the intensity and immediacy of the narrative response. This differs from today's approach, where films, plays, and narratives often move through chronological sequences, potentially losing focus on the immediate present. This shift isn't necessarily negative, but is something to be mindful of. The Greeks ensured the audience's close attention by focusing on the here and now. In large amphitheater, stages were set where actors often played multiple roles. Communicating the passage of time could be challenging and confusing, using masks and body language to portray various characters across the expansive space. Attempting to capture different ages among these characters could complicate matters. Unlike in the past, today's preference often leans toward non-linear storytelling, diverging from the straightforward narrative of Greek theatre. Nevertheless, for ancient audiences, unity of time served a distinct purpose, fostering urgency that intensified the narrative's immediacy and impact. Next, let's examine the unity of action. First, we must ask the question, what constitutes action? Action isn't necessarily characters fighting or engaging in violent or spectacular actions on stage. Rather, action consists of the sequential steps that unfold from the beginning to the end of the story. As the plot develops, it captures and maintains the audience's interest and attention. In Greek theatre, action was conveyed primarily through dialogue within the narrative. Narratives can be categorized into two types: linear and non-linear. Unlike in the past, today's preference often leans toward non-linear storytelling, diverging from the straightforward narrative of Greek theatre. In literature, narrative refers to the presentation of events that form a story. Linear narratives present events in the order they occur, with a clear beginning, middle, and end. This structure describes events sequentially. Non-linear narratives, on the other hand, do not adhere to such a structured format. They may start in the middle or the end of the story and use flashbacks or flash-forwards to connect events. Non-linear narratives are sometimes called disjointed or disrupted narratives. Oedipus Rex exemplifies a linear narrative presented logically by recounting events in the order they unfold without the use of flashbacks or flash-forwards. Aristotle identifies this linear form as contributing to the unity of action. Oedipus Rex is a notable example where the story progresses on a straight line from the prophecy of a terrible fate to its eventual fulfillment. It's paradoxical that a linear play ends cyclically, returning to its starting point, the prophecy of the Delphic oracle. This Greek genius intertwines a linear structure with cyclical content, where human efforts to defy fate lead to a tragic outcome. Discussing the distinction between linear and non-linear narratives, it's evident how each structure shapes the storytelling experience. Linear narratives unfold events in chronological order, maintaining a clear narrative progression from beginning to end. For example, classic Greek tragedies like Sophocles' Antigone follow a linear narrative where events occur sequentially, leading to a climactic resolution. Non-linear narratives, in contrast, disrupt chronological order, often starting in the middle or at the end of the story and using flashbacks or flash-forwards to connect events. A contemporary example is Christopher Nolan's film Memento, where the protagonist's story is told in reverse order, starting with the ending and moving backward through time. Let's now look at unity of place. Unity of action is closely tied to unity of place. Ideally, a play's action should occur in a minimal number of locations, preferably just one. In ancient Greek theatre, logistical challenges like actors playing multiple roles necessitated that the action take place in a single setting. The large open amphitheatres lacked curtains or the fourth wall in theatre terminology, with everything happening in full view of the audience. This constraint made it difficult to portray characters in different places wearing different costumes, and changing stage settings frequently would disrupt the flow and immediacy of the performance. Let us now discuss Oedipus Rex as an illustration of the three unities. Oedipus Rex serves as a prime example of a story unfolding in a linear fashion. What is striking about the play is its plot moving along a straight line, intertwining the past and the present and completing a full circle with the prophecy of the Delphic oracle, which initiated the plot by predicting a grievous disaster ultimately coming true. It appears paradoxical that a linear narrative concludes in a cyclical manner, returning to its starting point, the prophecy of the Delphic oracle. This juxtaposition of linear structure with cyclical content showcases Greek ingenuity. The efforts of individuals including Oedipus, his father King Lares, and his mother Queen Jocasta to defy the Delphic oracle result in a monumental tragedy.